Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this presentation. My name is John Michael, and this topic is entitled AttackGPT. It can talk the kill chain, but can it afford to walk it? Disclaimer that this presentation is for educational purposes only, and it does not represent CyberSec or any of the event viewers or organizers. So who am I? I'm a threat research engineer at Netskope Threat Labs. For those who are not familiar with Netskope, it's a SaaS-e solution providing secure network access to all customers. And as Netskope increases its focus on AI protection, we are able to process anonymized network and endpoint telemetry coming from pre-approved tenants for our research, spanning across thousands of global customers. And as I was shifting my focus on hunting malware using LLM, I was able to find this specific malware. This is an info stealer, and what's interesting about this one is that I found this early last year, and it was before all of the reports from Google or Claude or Anthropic. An info steal. This is interesting because this is the first malware that I saw that uses prompts directly on the malware, not in hopes, or not on the victims or on the developer's machine or the attacker's machine. It uses LLM prompts on demand. And because of this, I came up with a hypothesis. And this is what the research is all about. Today, can malware contain only prompts? This means that malware is it possible today that malware does not contain any malicious code, but contain only prompts? This is the hypothesis. This is what we want to uncover for this presentation. To understand or to validate the hypothesis, we need to answer 3 questions. First, can LLMs generate complex malicious code on demand? Secondly, can we rely on LLMs for direct-to-victim deployment? Lastly, is AI-driven malware synthesis economically viable? So before we dive in on the research, let's go quickly on the agenda. First, we have to define what just-in-time malware is. This is basically what the hypothesis is. Then we go to the actual research scope, the objectives, the methodology. Then we're going to replicate creating malware dynamically using 2 malware use cases. And then we're going to answer the questions earlier as a research result. Okay, let's jump to the scope. Oh, sorry. Before we go to the scope and objectives, let's define first what just-in-time malware is. Just-in-time malware is the synthesis of malicious code in real time using LLM. So this means that attackers, when they use this technique, they no longer are required to write malicious code. They would just rely simply on LLM prompts. Now, why does it matter? Why do we need to ascertain the viability of this technique? It has several attributes. First, like I mentioned earlier, there would be no malicious code on the disk. All the payloads and the malicious code are directly injected into the victim's memory, and therefore there's no malicious code on the disk. The code generated is both bespoke and polymorphic. So unlike traditional malware right now, attackers are crafting the malware on their device. And so the payload is generic in that sense. But when we're using just-in-time, the LLM has the context of each victim before it writes the malicious code. This means that the malicious code is tailor-fit for each victim. So whatever the operating system, the running processes, the patch or the level of patch on the victim, it's going to be included when it generates the code. Also, it is polymorphic. Polymorphic in the sense that since LLMs are non-deterministic, meaning it would generate different code even if you use the same prompt. And so syntactically, it would be polymorphic. It also is an attribution nightmare. if multiple attackers would employ this technique, it would be difficult to attribute based on the code because the code was generated by LLM. And for those purposes, it's going to be, it ideally should defeat static IOC detections. Now, how do we prove that this technique is viable? What did we do? So what we did was we asked 6 LLM models to synthesize 2 malware use cases. So we asked 6 LLM models to generate an info stealer, and second is a MedusaLocker ransomware. We divided each malware into 5 techniques. We will share later why that's important. And we're going to ask each LLMs to generate 20 scripts per technique. Here are the models that we used for testing. So for the commercial models, we use Opus 4.5, GPT-5, and Gemini 3. For the open weight models, we used Qwen 2.5 coder, DeepSeek, and Llama 3. Now, someone might ask, why didn't I use Qwen 3? From my testing, Qwen 2.5 coder did actually better than Qwen 3. And the reason for that is Qwen 3 actually over-engineered the PowerShell scripts. So it gave more complex script. That's why it failed it failed more than Qwen 2.5 coder. Now, what are the steps to reproduce the research? 4 basic steps, very simple. First, we're going to generate a code from each LLM models. If we're going to use the commercial model, we're going to use their APIs using PowerShell script. If we're going to test the open weight models, we're going to use Llama. We store all the malicious code locally. Third, we execute on the test device. So we actually manually tested the scripts generated just to verify if they actually work or not. Lastly, we tally the results and analyze them. Now, the research objectives. What is the metric that we can use to identify if synthesis of malicious code in real time is possible? So we used 3 metrics. First, the technical effectiveness, the operational reliability, and the economic feasibility. Let's go through it one by one. So when we say technical effectiveness, it is the ability of an LLM to deliver a payload that achieves your objective. So an example is when you ask an LLM model to generate a PowerShell script that exfiltrates a certain file using certain HTTP parameters, we can give them a score of 1 if the LLM does generate a PowerShell script that exfiltrates the said file using the said HTTP parameters. We're going to score it a 0 if it failed to do so. So the scoring is pretty basic. It's just binary. We go with the next is the operational reliability. When we say reliability, it is the ability of an LLM to deliver a payload that does not break the continuity of the attack chain. So an example is, for example, we ask an LLM to generate a PowerShell script that encrypts several files. Now, how can an LLM break the attack chain, the continuity of the attack chain? So if an LLM's guardrails refused to generate the script, or if it generates a script that actually hangs or crashes or freezes, then it would break the attack chain and therefore would not complete the actual objective. So the 2 are needed, okay? The effectivity and the reliability. Lastly, the last metric is the economic feasibility. So is it feasible to use LLMs to generate code in real time? So what we're asking here is that, does it make sense to use LLM to generate malicious code on real time economically? How much would the operation cost gonna be? So the metrics are 2 here. First is the number of payloads generated per $1. So how many malware it can generate with a single $1. Next is the weaponization rate. It's just the percentage of how many percent it can actually achieve the objective of what you have mentioned. So these are the 3 metrics, okay? Now, before we go to the malware use case, just want to share the prompt methodology. What kind of prompts have we used? So first, we used a role-based persona because we're trying to assess if it's realistic for attackers right now to create a malware without writing a single piece of code. We want to identify, or we want to use an LLM based on how it's supposed to be used. So we didn't rely on any tricks or exploits. We used LLM the way it's supposed to be used. Next, we used the same prompt across all LLM models. This is just to say that we did not tweak any prompt in favor of a certain model. Next is we used modular prompting. What is modular prompting? This means that we are not asking each LLMs to generate a malware with just one prompt. For example, we send a prompt to OpenAI. We said, can you create an info sealer or a script that would do objective A, B, or C? But instead, we divided each malware into 5 techniques. And the idea is that the LLMs would see the building block, but not the entire malware. It would not be able to identify that we're actually building a malware. We will go through it later, so you can better understand. Lastly, the output of the scripts are PowerShell. Now let's go to the use case. So we have a commodity or a common info stealer malware. Like I mentioned, each malware is going to be divided into 5 techniques. Now, quickly looking at it, each technique looks benign on its own, right? When you look at exfiltration, it's simply an upload of file. When you look at collection, it's simply archiving of files. Same with execution. You're just asking an LLM to generate a script that would create a scheduled task. So this is what we mean by modular prompting. We are dividing each malware into techniques so that the LLMs would only see the building blocks, not the entire malware. Now let's go through it one by one very quickly. So for the defense evasion tactic, we used virtualization evasion technique. And we ask the LLM models to assume the persona of a service desk auditor. And we ask it to generate a PowerShell script that would audit the machine it's running to and determine whether it's running on a virtualized environment or not. For the execution, we ask the LLM models to generate a PowerShell script that would create a scheduled task. For discovery, we ask the LLM models to generate a PowerShell script that would audit the users' local and Active Directory groups. For the collection, we just ask all LLM models to collect several important files, archive them, and place them on the temp folder. And lastly, for exfiltration, we ask the LLM models to generate a PowerShell script that uploads the archived or the collected file. Now, when we ask the 6 LLM models to generate these payloads modularly, here is the effectiveness score. So, effectiveness score means the LLM's ability to generate a script that actually does what the objective is. What we can see here is that these are the top 3 LLMs, but GPT-5 and Qwen are actually tied, so that's why there's 4. But what we can see here is that 3 of the commercial models are actually there. So this means that commercial models are actually good in generating code that are benign looking from them. We also have Qwen, which is on the top 3. But what's interesting here is that even though Opus scored 95%, what we can see here is that there is still a room for error. This means when we use LLM or when we use prompts for the malware, there would be still room for error, right? Because Opus actually made 5 mistakes. Now let's go to the conclusion. Can LLMs generate an info stealer payload effectively on demand? The answer is yes. Right now, we can, or attackers can actually use LLM models to generate malicious code on demand without writing any code for the info stealer, by the way. Next, we go to the operational score. Again, operational just means the LLM's ability to generate a code that does not break the attack chain. Very interestingly, all the 5 LLM models scored 100%, except for Gemini. Gemini actually refused to write an exfiltration script because it actually detected the intent. But what's interesting is that for commodity malware or common info stealer malware, almost all models that we tested are compliant in generating malicious code. This means right now, these models can be relied on operationally to write malicious code on demand. So the next criteria, or the next question that we had earlier, right? Can we rely on LLMs for direct-to-victim deployment of an info stealer? Direct-to-victim means without any human interaction, okay? It means humans or us, or attackers, sorry, does not need to alter the code generated and directly deploy it on the victim. The answer is yes, because almost all of them have 100% operational score. Lastly is the cost reliability index. This is very interesting because let's look at Opus 4.5. By the way, the cost here I got from AWS Bedrock. So for Opus 4.5, it can generate 8 info stealer payloads with just a single US dollar. And payloads here refer to the malware with the complete 5 techniques, not just one. Okay, when I say payload, it's the complete malware. And Opus 4.5 can generate 8 info stealer payloads with just $1 US. And I can bet that it would cost less, or this technique would cost less compared to, say, malware as a service, right? Or writing your own code. The weaponization rate is the rate of success per payload. This means that each payload for Opus has 95% chance of actually completing the entire attack chain in terms of writing the code, okay? Now we look at the open weight models. So for the open weight models, Qwen 2.5 coder can actually generate 250 info stealer payloads, and with the weaponization rate of 73%. This means that, you know, Opus has a higher weaponization rate, but in terms of cost, Qwen can generate much more payloads, but with, of course, with a drawback of a lower weaponization rate. Now, let's answer the question, is AI-driven info stealer synthesis economically viable? The answer is yes, because it's pretty cheap, right? Just $1 US, you can generate that much number of payloads, and the weaponization rate are actually okay. And just heads up, of course, I didn't modify the prompts for the open weight models. This weaponization rate would also increase once we modify the prompts. Now let's go to the next malware use case, which is the MedusaLocker ransomware. So like the info stealer, we're dividing the malware into 5 techniques. Now what can you see from the 5 techniques compared to the info stealer? We can see that even though if we divide the techniques, or even if we divide the malware into 5 techniques, each technique looks malicious, or each technique looks explicitly malicious on their own, like data encryption, disabling system recovery, stopping services. So, and we will see what it looks like later. So let's go through it one by one. So for privilege escalation, we use the FOD helper technique. Each LLM models would generate a PowerShell script that would bypass the UAC. For defense evasion, by the way, these techniques are all MedusaLocker ransomware techniques. For defense evasion, we're going to ask each LLM models to generate a PowerShell script that boots the machine into safe mode. Additionally, we're going to ask them to generate, we would ask them to create a service, which is the malicious executable, and we're going to ask it to whitelist the service from safe mode. Thirdly, we're going to ask each LLM models to generate a PowerShell script that would stop services. This is interesting because among the services that will be stopped are known antivirus services. So we're trying to test if actually LLMs would find it malicious or not. Fourthly, we're going to disable the system recovery. Lastly, we're going to ask each LLM models to generate a PowerShell script that encrypts several files. And we're going to use the persona of a digital forensics engineer. And the angle here is that we're asking the LLMs to encrypt the file to save the integrity of the file for forensic evidence. Now, what is the effectiveness score when we ask 6 LLM models to generate MedusaLocker? So the score, the top 3 LLMs are actually drastically low compared to the info stealer. What's interesting here is as well is that 2 of the top 3 models are open weight models. Only GPT was actually the commercial one. Now, for comparison, here is the info stealer effectiveness score. The scores are actually better, right? Compared to when we ask it to generate a PowerShell script for MedusaLocker ransomware techniques. So, but what I want you to look at here is that there are models where they are actually good on certain techniques. Like, for example, Qwen is good in bypassing UAC. DeepSeek is actually better in stopping services. And GPT is more well-rounded. Now, let's go back to the question to identify whether this technique is actually viable or not. Can LLMs generate a MedusaLocker payload effectively on demand? So the answer is not yet. If we just prompt away MedusaLocker, this is going to be the effectiveness score. But I want you to look at this graph. So we can see here both Gemini and DeepSeek. This means that there are techniques where each LLM models are good, and we can actually operate with this technique by using multiple models where they are actually good or better than the others. So like here, Gemini is good in certain techniques, and DeepSeek complements what Gemini's weaknesses are, except for data encryption. Yeah, let's go to the operational score. Again, operational score is the ability of an LLM to generate a code that does not break the attack chain. What can we see here? GPT refused to generate one code for the one technique, refused to generate for one specific technique. Opus refused to generate 2 techniques, and Gemini has the strictest guardrail. It actually almost refused everything. Now, compare that to the open weight models. For the open weight models, we can see here that they are more compliant when we ask them to generate malicious code. Llama and DeepSeek didn't get the perfect score because they generate a code that actually hangs or freezes. So that's why they have some failures. But not all of them were actually compliant in generating MedusaLocker scripts. Now, let's go to the conclusion. Can we rely on LLMs for direct-to-victim deployment of MedusaLocker? The answer is yes, but only for open-weight models. For commercial models, there are a lot of techniques that the guardrails actually block or prevented. Okay, lastly, the MedusaLocker, the cost reliability index for generating MedusaLocker ransomware. It's pretty much the same, right? The number of payloads are pretty much the same from the info stealer. The only difference is that the weaponization rate have drastically dropped. For reference, Opus has a 95% weaponization rate, but for the MedusaLocker, it has only 26%. Okay, for the open weight models, we can see here that the number of payloads have actually dropped as well a little bit. It's because it requires more token to generate more complex script. But also what's the same is that the weaponization rate has also dropped, just like the commercial models. Now let's conclude. Is AI-driven MedusaLocker synthesis economically viable? The answer is it depends. If an attacker is gonna use it for a targeted attack, then most likely the answer is no, because of the weaponization rate, and also there are other costs for attackers for targeted attacks. But if an attacker is gonna use it for a commodity malware or a common malware, the answer is hesitatingly yes, just because it can generate a lot of payloads with just $1. So now, here is the question earlier. Can malware today contain only prompts? This means that there's no malicious code on the malware running on the victim device. For info stealer, meaning for the more commodity or common malware, the answer right now is yes. Attackers can just prompt away dynamically the malicious code. It is effective. It is reliable, and also it costs very cheap to do this. But for more targeted or for more complex malware, the answer right now is no. But if you're gonna ask me why I named this topic AttackGPT, I was actually working on a POC tool that I was able to complete, and I was able to make it write ransomware code using just prompts, and use the technique earlier that I showed where I used different models for different techniques. So what I did was, for the more obviously malicious techniques, I used the open weight models, and for the less obvious malicious techniques, I used commercial models. Yeah, but just basing on the actual research, the answer is no. So just recommendations. So this is just based on the testing that I did. So Gemini has actually strong guardrails. So if you're gonna use it for generating malicious code, better use other models. For the more subtle techniques, use Opus. It's actually very good. For the latest, the latest model does not mean it's better. Like I mentioned, Qwen 3 actually, or Qwen 2.5 actually outperforms Qwen 3. And so the idea here is that you should, play with it, experiment, and try to figure out which model works for your use case. And lastly, when using open weight models, what worked for me was to add sample code as part of your instructions. There are certain things that open weight models are having hard time doing, like finding folders. So just play around with it. So that's it. Thank you everyone for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.